Hey there, good morning. It's Jeannie Yandel in for Patricia Murphy. It's Wednesday. This is Seattle Now. Things are opening up again. You're vaccinated. And summer's here. But so is breakthrough COVID.
Yeah, I want to know how careful I need to be, and just so that I'm not blowing this out of proportion because 3 people in my life who are vaccinated just got sick recently.
We'll get a reality check from virologist Angie Rasmussen in a minute. But first, let's get you caught up. Oh boy, there's another lawsuit surrounding the mayor's texts. You may recall that 10 months of the mayor's texts went missing. 10 months during which large protests broke out daily in Seattle following George Floyd's murder, police abandoned the East Precinct, and protesters set up an autonomous zone on Capitol Hill for weeks. To sum up, a lot of stuff happened during the time those missing texts were initially sent. And now, lawyers for the city of Seattle deny the city broke Washington state's public records law during the time those texts went missing. So the city is countersuing the Seattle Times in response to its lawsuit that alleges the city mishandled those texts. Sometimes it can feel like Seattle's been taken over by tech workers. Now, there's actually some data to back that up. GeekWire reports the Seattle metro area added the most tech jobs of any major city over the last 5 years. 48,000 jobs since 2016, according to the real estate firm CBRE. But that doesn't make us the biggest tech city. That's still San Francisco. Seattle ranked 7th overall for cities with large tech job markets. And we're at 28 days and counting, and there's still no rain in the forecast. The National Weather Service says that puts us about halfway to the record of 55 consecutive days without rain. If we get there, that would mean an entirely dry July, which has only happened 5 times in the past 77 years of record keeping. No word yet on when to expect wildfire smoke. Maybe you've heard this story. A friend of a friend was fully vaccinated, and yet they got COVID. This is called breakthrough COVID, and to be clear, it's rare. State health officials say we've had just over 2,500 cases in Washington over the last 7 months. But that data is hard to square with those stories. That's what happened with Emily Griffin. She's a DJ here in Seattle. After months of Zoom gigs, Emily was ready to get out and start booking live shows in actual dance clubs again. But then, 3 people she knows in the club scene here, people who were fully vaccinated, got COVID.
Once opening weekend happened and I saw how busy it got, and knowing and loving club culture and knowing that it's all about getting in there together and getting sweaty together, I just decided that I wasn't ready. And so I canceled my gigs.
These personal stories about breakthrough COVID have a way of sticking in our heads, especially as Seattle starts to feel full throttle again. So what do we need to know about breakthrough COVID so we can make the safest decisions possible? Dr. Angie Rasmussen is here to help us with that. She's a virologist at VITO, the Vaccine Institute at the University of Saskatchewan. So Emily's big question is she wants to know if she's blowing this kind of anecdotal stuff, 3 friends of hers having gotten COVID after being vaccinated, if she's blowing that out of proportion, if her reaction is out of proportion to learning that. And frankly, I want to know the same thing, because as much as I've been trying to follow the science here, at this point, I hear one scary story and I'm thinking, what if I've done everything wrong here? So how concerning is this?
So this is a great topic because everybody, I think, has questions about this. And to a certain degree, some of the answers are going to be, we don't know. The way I look at it is that I think a lot of people think of vaccines as these shields, these impenetrable walls that the virus is not supposed to be able to get across. But the reality is a little more complicated than that. On top of that, one thing people really do need to be prepared for is hearing more and more anecdotal stories about breakthrough infections. So there will be breakthrough infections. The thing to watch and the thing to be concerned about is how many of those breakthrough infections are people who are ending up in the hospital? How many of those people are getting really, really sick? So in that sense, people should not be worried about it. Now, that doesn't mean that people should feel bad if they don't feel comfortable going out and resuming, pre-2020 life, and going to a club, going to a bar, going to an indoor restaurant. I myself am definitely going to take a while, I think, before I stop wearing a mask indoors in public spaces, before I start going to crowded indoor spaces and gathering with people from outside my household extensively the way that I used to do before the pandemic. I think that's completely prudent and smart, especially while we have communities in the U.S. with high prevalence, including of the Delta variant.
I want to ask about the Delta variant, actually, and, these other new variants that we're seeing crop up. It's hard for me to gauge whether we're putting the right amount of focus on the danger posed by these new variants. Is there a risk here of focusing too much on variants and thus reducing the likelihood that everyone who can get a vaccine will get a vaccine?
Yeah, I think that this is one of the big disconnects. So certainly, I think it is important to talk about the variants, and especially variants like Alpha and Delta. And the reason for that is that both of those variants are more transmissible. That means that these variants are mostly a problem in unvaccinated communities. So people really do, when we talk about variants, we should not be talking about, oh my God, terrible new variants out circulating. What are we going to do? The pandemic's going to last forever. We should be saying, hey, the variants are bad, but we are fully vaccinated. We don't have anything to worry about. We should redirect our focus on making sure that people who are not yet vaccinated can get vaccinated. And I think a lot of people also seem to think that at this point, most of the people who are not vaccinated have chosen to not be vaccinated. And I don't think that's true at all. I think there are still a number of people who are finding barriers to vaccination. We don't have mandatory sick leave. People are concerned about being able to take time off of work should they have side effects. Many people still don't have necessarily transportation to get to a vaccination site. They may not have childcare. There's a lot of reasons why people have not yet been able to get vaccinated that have nothing to do with their reluctance or skepticism about the vaccines. And I think we really do, when we talk about variants, need to focus on the fact that right now in the U.S., the vast, vast majority, over 99% of the people who are dying of COVID, the people who are being hospitalized with COVID, are unvaccinated.
I really hear what you're saying about barriers to vaccination, but one of the things that I think about all the time is the fact that we have kids under 12 who can't get vaccinated. My kid is 9 years old, right? And so as I think about these more transmissible variants, as I think about the existence of breakthrough cases, I am really trying to square this kind of push to reemerge with how to keep my kids safe. And I know other parents are thinking about the same thing.
Well, that absolutely. That, I think, is something that's really at the forefront of people's minds right now, because at the same time as children can't be vaccinated under the age of 12, many school districts are saying that they're going to have in-person schooling resume with no masks. And I think that that is a real concern. I actually don't understand the reasoning for that at all. It's true that children are at less risk of getting severe COVID, but that doesn't mean that they're at no risk. Hundreds of children have died from COVID-19. We don't know the rate at which children develop long COVID, but they certainly seem to do so. All of these things, to me anyways, suggest that at the very least, we should be making sure that kids do wear masks in communities, particularly where there's low vaccination rates, where there may not be a vaccination mandate for teachers and staff at schools to return to work, and where there's high prevalence. So to me, it really is mystifying why some schools are not insisting on maintaining mitigation efforts if they are going to open to in-person schooling before children under the age of 12 are eligible for vaccination.
I'm glad that you brought up masks because it does feel a little confusing what we're supposed to be doing here. I know the CDC has said if you're fully vaccinated, you don't need to wear a mask in most places. On the other hand, there is a story I heard from Emily about 3 friends of hers who had breakthrough COVID. So, are you still masking up when you go out, Angie? What are you doing about this?
I am. So in Saskatchewan, where I have moved to, our phase 3, which is basically full reopening, started July 11th. And I went to Costco today to get an eye exam. And I saw that the signs on the door at Costco said now instead of masks required, it said masks encouraged. So I did wear a mask. My employer, my university, has said that we will be wearing masks at work until at least August 31st. Personally, I think that until prevalence is down and everybody can be fully vaccinated. Now, it's a little bit of a different situation here in Canada because people did delay their second doses. That was the Canadian policy. So there's a lot of people who are partially vaccinated here, more so than in Seattle. But even if I were in Seattle, where a lot of people are fully vaccinated, I think that in public spaces, indoors, I will continue to wear a mask, at the very least out of courtesy, because it makes other people feel more comfortable.
You talked earlier about all of the things that we still don't know when it comes to COVID. And honestly, that's the thing that has been, frankly, messing with me about trying to figure out what the best decisions and the best moves are in this moment of the pandemic, when there's this sort of push to reopen, but, it's also clear that it's not completely eradicated. Not everyone is yet vaccinated. And it's hard to ignore a feeling, at least here in Seattle, that, it's summer. We made it through the worst of the pandemic. At what point do you think it will feel okay to be carefree? Are we even close to that moment yet?
Well, that I can't answer. And I'd like to say, yes, we are, but I'm not sure about that. I think that, unfortunately, the CDC's decision to recommend that vaccinated people don't have to wear masks without tying that to any metrics about prevalence in the community, about vaccination rates in the community, I think was a terrible mistake. And I think that what we're not going to see again, probably a huge surge like we saw last winter. But I do think we will see regional surges in places like exactly what we're seeing right now in Missouri. In Seattle, I think one of the wonderful things about the Pacific Northwest is, apart from that heat wave, is generally beautiful summer weather that does make it very conducive to being outside. I think that is something that people can do. They can feel a little bit more carefree than they did last year. It's disappointing that it's not going to be the hot vax summer that I think a lot of people have been wanting. But we are on, the way out of this. It's just that we're not quite there yet. And there are going to be enough people who think that we are, that those of us who are concerned, I think, have good reason to be, and we can just take some precautions to keep ourselves and our communities as safe as possible.
That's something to hold on to. Dr. Angie Rasmussen is a virologist at VITO, the Vaccine Institute at the University of Saskatchewan. Thank you so much for talking with us today.
Anytime. I'm always happy to chat with you and the folks in my hometown.
Thanks for spending some time with us today. And if you haven't already done it, drop us a review in Apple Podcasts. Jason Pagano produced today's show. Our production team is Clare McGrane and Caroline Chamberlain Gomez. Diana Opong does our social media. Matt Jorgensen does our theme music. I'm Jeannie Yandel. Trish is back tomorrow.